I guess we can get started. One of our panelists is not here, but he'll come in and answer all the tough questions.
Yes.
So we'll have them lined up for him. But welcome to the Asia Medtech Investing session. We have a really good list of panelists here that will share their experiences today. And we'll cover a bunch of different topics. I don't know exactly what kind of background you folks have, whether you are working with startups, you're doing startup investing in the medtech space, but we'll focus on Asia medtech, looking at ways to invest in these companies, different considerations in investing in these companies. We'll talk about the different trends that we see in early stage investing. We'll talk about how investors work with entrepreneurs. We'll talk about how startups, medtech startups, can actually work with strategics and enter into partnerships. And then we can talk about some regulatory issues, which our panelist, who's not here, has volunteered to talk about, especially like if you are entering into the China market and you want to know what the approval process is with the CFDA. And then if you're looking for investments from Chinese parties, there's this thing called CFIUS these days that the government in the US is looking at foreign investors and looking at very critical technologies of the US to see if potential investors qualify to invest in these companies. So we can cover a lot of those different topics, and then covering like exits, how do you prepare yourself for an M&A situation or an IPO to the extent the medtech company is fortunate enough to be in that position. So as I said, we have a wealth of experience on this panel, and I'd like to go down the row and have each of the panelists introduce himself or herself, and then we can get started with the actual discussion. So, Gene, why don't you start first and provide a little background about yourself, what kinds of things that you are looking at for investments, and just a little bit about your background.
Sure, thank you, Gene. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jin Yao from Medtech. Medtech is a consulting group originally, and later years recently we started to work with investment. So the area we have focused on is really I call consumerized medicine. As in the future, I feel like the healthcare is going to have a big transformation from this hospital centralized healthcare is going to get to the primary centered or personalized centered healthcare. I call it consumerized medicine. So any products or technologies or services related to consumerized medicine, we have high interest. So my background, I have PhD in biochemistry, cell molecular biology. I have worked in cancer research for a long time, and then so right now I just I started this. I think I get my work transformed into a new area. So this is what make me feel excited every day. Thank you.
William?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm William Day, founding partner of Shanbei Capital. Shanbei Capital is a Silicon Valley-based VC, and we are 70% focused on Medtech investment. So the fund is relatively young, about 3.5 years, and we have so far invested in 21 companies. And we are very lucky that we actually, two of companies actually we received offers for acquisitions. We are in the final negotiations, and hopefully that we can really get exit very quickly. And also several companies we have also finalized the follow-on financings, And I think we are very happy, even though the tension between US-China is getting serious, but we are still very positive about the future. So we are really focused on the technologies. Whatever happens, and we don't worry too much about it. And I think hopefully the good technologies can really benefit patients in both countries, in the US and in China. So I think that goal shouldn't change whatever happens.
Okay. Thanks, William. Mark.
My name is Mark Tang. I'm from New York. Global Health Capital. We manage a fund, probably $170 million. We're actually a late stage fund, but we work, we invest in drugs, device, diagnostic, whatever in the healthcare area. So in the last 2 years, we did about 20 investments, 15 in Asia, 5 in the US. We have 2 exits, and 2 IPOs, not exit yet. Still there. So I'll be happy to talk to you, discuss about our experience in this area. My background, I was a banker, so I started as an analyst in early 1994. So, and I took my first year in China actually. Is the United Family Hospital in Beijing. That's very early. And it was sold to Fusang 3 years ago for about 270 million. It was a very early day. And I also involved with 2 other deals. One of is Simsing Pharma. So we did the deal with Simsing. We combined with the government take the public. But then they went back. And I also was investing in Wuxi Pharma, and they also went back to China. So now I'm looking at the US company, don't go back anymore.
Thank you, Mark. And as for me, actually before introducing myself, I'd like to introduce my colleague in the audience, Yan Chen, who is a member of our firm and also did all the work preparing for the background of this particular panel. But Yan will be around afterwards if you want to, get her card and get her contact information too. And so, by way of background from my perspective, I joined W.I. Harper, our current VC firm, 8+ years ago, and actually I'm focusing primarily on healthcare investments. W.I. Harper has been around for over 25 years, investing in Greater China and the U.S., one of the first Greater China-U.S. cross-border venture firms. We manage over $1 billion in assets, and 60% of our investments are in traditional technology, 40% in healthcare, 60% in Greater China, 40% in the U.S. And in healthcare, we do medical devices, diagnostics, services, and more recently in the biotech drug discovery area. So, but we have offices here in San Francisco, in Beijing, and in Taiwan. Hopefully, we'll be able to provide the kind of support and provide introductions to companies that need to bridge, between Asia and the U.S. We want to make this an interactive sort of discussion. So, basically the format will be, I'll give a little overview, sort of a little background on Medtech investing focused in Asia, and then we will go down the row and have each of our panelists talk about maybe a deal or two that they have been particularly excited about, and then some of the lessons learned or some things that they were able to take away from those experiences and those deals to share with all of you. And then hopefully the other panelists can always chime in with their comments and perspectives and insights. And then we'll go to our second panelist and talk about other general topics and then go down the row. And we'll probably end up about maybe 10 minutes or even 15 minutes before the end of the session for any of your questions. But feel free to jump in at any time and ask any of us questions, and I'm sure they can answer all the questions. But anyway, briefly to set the stage, we're focusing on medtech investing, so we're not going to talk about necessarily biotech and pharma investing, although our panelists do have experience in that. So the focus will be on medtech. And then in terms of Asia, I think our panelists have much more experience in China than the other Asian countries, like India and Korea and Japan. Although we have dabbled in those particular territories also. If you have any specific questions and we can't answer them relating to those countries, we'll be able to get those answers for you. And so if we look at Asia, I mean, Asia's got what, 60% of the world's population, over 4.3 billion people. Growth is dramatic in all respects, and in the medtech sector especially, it's going to be responsible for like 35% of the total growth of the globe's medtech sort of growth. And so there's a lot of opportunities there, but there are also a lot of challenges too, because as we will discuss later, you have to deal with the regulatory environment in each of these countries. One simple directive from the central government somewhere may cut the price of your product in half, and you have to deal with those kind of situations. And then the competitive forces from other companies, especially in Asia, are driving prices down. So you have to figure out new ways, novel ways, innovative ways to squeeze more margins in the overall ecosystem and the supply chain. You have to hire the right kind of talent locally in order to go ahead and have the team that understands the local environment best to compete, whether it's with multinationals coming in or with other local competitors. So those are things that we really want to dive into more detail. And so without taking much more of the speaking space, let me go ahead and then perhaps ask Eugene in terms of sort of your experience with early stage investing. You had mentioned to the rest of us on this panel earlier that you've actually seen some changes over time and more recently in early stage investing. And then you wanted to talk about a particular case that you can share with us. So maybe you can go ahead and tell us a little bit more about your experiences.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would like to share a case about it's a consumerized medicine. That's an area of which we are focusing at right now and also in the future. So we think it's really consumerized medicine is more like diagnostic device related and some medical device related, and also get AI or digital health integrated into this platform. It's really a combination of those things together. Like a traditional medical device, I come from Minnesota. That's a very traditional medical alley in US. So lots of medical device is very heavily. It's good. It's a good medical device. It's like which will be used in hospital majorly. You do the operational procedures, so that's very useful. But in the future, people are getting more and more concentrated or taking care of their own health, even they feel like they are healthy right now. So this population will be great. It's like maybe 95% of this population in this category, but maybe 1% or maybe at most 5% population is most on this hospital areas. Those really they get sick, they don't feel comfortable at all. So they go to the hospital, so they have this operations procedures. So that would be like traditionally medical device concentrated area. But what we are focusing right now is really for the population is for 95%. These people normally they want to get everyday monitored, and then they want to get disease. They don't have the disease right now. They want to know in their future what kind of possible disease they could have, or what kind of prevention that could be done for them. So this, I think that's the future for people are looking for. So this is the area we think that will really transform the healthcare currently and also globally. So the case I'm going to say is there's it's an example, fitting our philosophy, investment philosophy. So the company is really a device company, and everyone knows Theranos, right? Theranos. So it's really there's a novel Bad Blood came out last year, so it's really a big story. But the idea, the concept is very good. The concept is good. The bad thing is they didn't work out. So that's a bad thing. And so the company which we did investment is really it's this type of company. But we just choose the technology should be good. We know this technology. They have over 260 patents over there. So you can see it. It's not like Theranos. You don't know what they are doing. They just claim they can do everything. You really don't know. For this, we know what they are doing, and also they have a team. It's really experienced team. It's not like Theranos, very young team. They don't have much experience in this healthcare industry. So lots of regulation, they don't know very much. So that's, I think, the bad thing for this company. So for us, we look at the technology that needs to be good, fitting the future, which we think. And also the team need to be good. They are experienced. They know what they are doing. They have people to do the different sections like manufacture, innovation, manufacture, regulation. They know what they are doing. And also, so the later, and also we think we need to get a resource for this company. The fundraising is not just money thing. It's also to gather the resource for this company, because the future, the direction we have interest is really future medicine. What is the future about the medicine? We kind of know, but we are not really sure. So we need to get the resource which is good for this company. They can provide information about what they are going to do. So I think that's very, very important for this new technologies, the startups, and also they have the direction is really innovation directions. So that's very, very, very useful from our experience. And we have helped the company. I think the market is really good for US, and also this company's market will be good in China or India, because it's really primary oriented over there. So we just help the company to get resources, very big VCs in China, healthcare section. And so in future, once they get into the China market, they know what they are doing, because there's a big help from those resources. So yeah, that's my sharing experience. Thank you.
Yeah, so William, G was talking about sort of some considerations in terms of investing in companies, right? She mentioned the team, she mentioned technology. How do you kind of look at a new sort of team coming in to make their pitch? What do you look for? What kinds of things do you watch out for? Some red flags in terms of another Theranos related company comes and tries to make a pitch. I mean, how do you go about evaluating?
Yeah, I think so. We are still focusing on really the best technologies, and the technology can really transform and improve the patient outcomes and the safe patient lives. So I think the first thing we look at the company basically is their technology, whether their technology is good enough to actually beat all existing technologies. I think that's very important. If the technology is not superior compared with the existing technology, sometimes maybe it's not worth really, I think, taking further look. Secondly, and we really look at the market. We look at the market in the US, whether the market is big enough, sufficient for the business to extend, to expand, and to make a business viable. And sometimes we see some very good technologies, but the market's not there, and so that we wait. And I think as we wait, we need to be patient, and until I think there is sufficient the patience in the market, so that the business can be viable. And then I think we look at the team. The team is extremely important. And so the team, whether the founder has sufficient experience and relevant experience, and I think so. Those are three factors, most important factors when we actually look at the company. And I think so. The one company, one investment I'd like to share with you, and it's the company is called Neurovascular. It's a stem retriever technologies, and which actually targeting to treat ischemic stroke patients. And so we invested in the company about 3 years ago, and when the company was still in very early stage, prototyping, and so we were one of the early investors. And so since then, the company went through the animal studies and also the design phase, and then I think first in human trial. And I think within about 2 years, I think we got a CE mark approval, and we got 39 patients treated, and the data were excellent compared with the existing products. So we're very excited, and so we led the last round of financing, and 3 months after we got an offer for acquisition. And so I think that this is a very typical case, and which we really like, and we will continue to try to fund such projects to invest in future.
Great. Thank you. And Mark, I mean, we're talking about looking at teams, looking at technology. You mentioned that you tend to wait a little bit later for later stage companies. And so is there any difference in terms of what you look for in these different categories? I mean, obviously, team's important, technology's important, market's important, but is there anything that's a little different from that, later stage perspective versus team company?
A lot of those criteria is sort of related with the LP. The LP, they're financial head, that those companies bank, they're very risk averse. And also, we are PE funds, so in a sense, the time frame, like the VC have 10 years, and we only have 5 years. So I mean, we're talking venture capitalists. The venture capital actually doesn't like risk. They want all the risk. So for us, there's a few things we like. One, for devices, we prefer to have some sort of approval in the country. It doesn't have to be US or somewhere else. So that's sort of proof of concept. So in a sense, we know that thing have good chances to work out. And we also basically like to look for the company that in their special area, top 2, or minimum 10 million investment per transaction. But if you are top 3, if we put money in and with a little bit help of resources, it can make you top 2, or we will be able to do. I think VC for VCs at the end of the day is the people. So we like to have the founders have some sort of entrepreneurial experience. They have done it here before versus that the new guys that you have to teach. I mean, it's perfectly fine. But if it's a guy I've never done it in a company, so we probably want to have Jamie comes in. they take over first, and then get risk a little bit, and then maybe in 3-5 years come to us. Essentially, when we put it in, we like to somehow get out in about 5 years. If we think more than 5 years, we just can't do it. That's the general thing. So I think the investment principle is pretty similar. It's just time horizon that sometimes dictate what stage you get in. We do very early stage. We did an early stage company, but it's a platform technology that you're able to access to the market. Go publicly, within 2-3 years. We still can do it. Essentially, just in about 5 years, we have to get out. We have to close the firm.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of a particular deal that we did at WI Harbor. We invested in this IVD diagnostic company in Beijing, and we had international investors and local investors, and we had been in this company for probably 4 or 5 years already, and it was getting pretty much near the end of the period for a VC firm to continue investing. And so we ended up deciding, okay, what do we do? And the company actually reached a good amount of revenues. It was making money. It was profitable, not extremely profitable, but we had opportunities to pursue possibly, looking at continuing growing and trying to put more money into the company, or there was a possibility of trying to sell it to a strategic, or the thing that reminded me, based on what Mark was saying, selling to a syndicate of PE investors, and ended up, we got 10 term sheets led by different parties, and when the PE investors came in, they said, okay, we are willing to buy all the VCs out, or if some of the VCs wanted to stay in, they could stay in if they wanted, and maybe gave the PE folks a little more confidence that the VCs would keep their money in and continue to ride with the company. But from our perspective, what we did was we did an analysis of, okay, do we want to sell now at 4x? Or do we want to put some money in, keep some money on the table, take some money off the table, or keep all our money in? And what would that look like if we kept some money in? We looked at the perspective of the PE investors who came in and said, okay, this is what we are looking at for this investment. We want to be able to take this company public locally in China, and therefore we have a horizon of maybe 3 years. Where we can get this company packaged up to go public, and we can probably get 2.5 or possibly 3x ourselves after 3 years. And so we look at this and said, okay, we have to wait another 3 years. We may get another 2x out of, a sure thing of 4x. But then we also appreciated the risks associated with the company, its competitive position in the marketplace, the management team, maybe not as stable as we think, and put all those factors together, and pretty much all the VC investors said, look, 4x is pretty good. we're gonna take our money. And then and it was very interesting because one particular investor who was one of the major investors came in and knew this company from before because he was involved earlier. And so 3 of the PE firms, it was CICC, Orbimed, and Actus came in. And so those are the considerations, because we have to be, as Mark said, accountable to our investors. And so if we continue to invest and we have to continue asking for extensions on our partnership agreement, and then at the end of the day we don't get any money back, that's where your LPs are going to be around next time. So, but anyway, so that I wanted to throw that in as a story.
For us, the more important thing is not losing money. We can take lower return, just because the risk of characteristics of the investors. You are LP probably if they're willing to take risk. My guys, they are
His guys are not in this room, so they can say that.
So in terms of example, I can give you one example. We have number one. The one diagnostic we did, we put I led about, it's about 70 million, but I was a lead, but I only have 10 million. That's not my typical size. So this company who does the colon, you guys the colon guy, right? And the colon guy is pretty good. But the issue is you have to send over there and come back. Take like 3 weeks, right? And then they get lost. My wife tried it last month. They set it out. It doesn't come back. So it's better to do it on the spot. So this company does instead of the studio, use blood test, and then you can do it on the spot. You can do it within 2 days. You have a kit, actually. You can work with those lab call. And then the specificity, the sensitivity is a little better on a stage 1, 2 cancer, a little better than what's on the market. But the best thing about it is within pre-cancer, we have our specificity about 65%, which is versus on others like I think colon guy is like 40. And the other German company who got the blood test they get approved is 26. So they didn't really say well. So we thought the business model is pretty good. And so what we did, we got the CE mark approved, and so we raised more money now. So we're starting in the US, and we think even if we don't get $7 billion market cap, which going out has about 700 million is pretty good, right? That means our pre-money is about 100 million. So for us, especially because we have some sort of Asian angle, so we like kind of business model which is working and does some sort of arbitrage type thing. Because that's what PE fund likes. But so that's why in our criteria specifically, the LP wanted us to have some sort of approval. That's the sort of thing we can convince them to this deal.
And actually, interestingly, I also like to share our story. So basically, the second company we have received offer for acquisition, and I think the founders actually they are really keen to sell the company right away. But some of the board members they think, since we received another offer from one of the major PE firms, and so probably we should wait, right? So we put money and we wait and we grow the top line and we grow the company, and the final selling price could be hugely different. And actually, my partner, Eric Eggerson, had a very good story to share. Actually, so he was one of the founders for Target Therapeutics. So the company was founded back in 1987. Yeah, so I think after 3 or 4 years, they received an offer for $40 million US, and then they decided to wait. They reject offer. They dig in and worked really hard for the next 6-7 years, and then the final price selling to Boston Scientific was $1.2 billion US. So he always was very different.
They were public, I think.
Yes.
I have some shares.
No, it's a tough choice sometimes, because you don't necessarily read this in textbooks, but you know, a lot of personal dynamics come into play, the dynamics among the board members. You know, some board members represent funds that are near the end of their life and they need to get exits. Others just started their fund and they're willing to wait longer. And so I've seen a lot of battles within boardrooms and seen this play out in terms of whether you should sell or you should wait. And you know, sometimes you wait and you lose all the opportunities and it leads to zero. So I know that a lot of you folks, or some of you folks, may have interest in working with Chinese companies or Asian companies, and so you know, I mean, if you have specific questions, please go ahead and ask them. But one general question I would like to ask the panelists is, you know, if let's say that I am a startup in the medtech space, and I'm looking for either investment from a company or a firm from Asia, or I'm looking for potential partnership opportunities. How do I go about identifying, the right parties to talk with, the people that I can actually trust, rather than spilling the beans and then knowing that somebody takes your idea and runs with it and copies that? I mean, is there a sort of a set of recommendations that you can provide for the folks who might have interest in partnering?
I have done, actually I can talk about it. I personally did a deal. I mean, I bought the US device company and the rights, China rights, and I went to China and I got approved, about a year and a half. Now take longer and then I accepted it. What I learned from this deal, I mean, this is my personal deal, totally, just my personal money, is one, if you work with Asia, like in China, the party perhaps you want to work for is the party who was able to sell. I mean, they really have distribution channel. In my case, it was in the vision area. The person I worked for was he's a sales guy in the vision area, and did pretty well. So that's why we. And the other thing you want to look at it, if they have a ability to get approval, they have some sort of infrastructure experience that it has dealt with FDA, because that's very delicate with my other drug, which also I licensed and I never got approval. Even if it was phase 2, they had the phase 2B data from US and they got rejected from Chinese government. It depends who saw that. So that's why the one thing. And then the other is the guy you work with. They want to make sure they're credible guys. So in our fund, so we had the LP that it's a major distribution channel in China. So in case we needed help, so they can come and help. But the sales area, it's so different in Asia over here. The rule here is much, more strict over there. Mushrooms, a lot of things that for us, like we're sitting and we can't adapt with. So as soon as they proved, I said, I don't, I saw their money was wired to the personal account. Because we should avoid the tax or whatever in China. I said, that's it, I'm out. So I sold it. I didn't want to deal with it. So I just want to do it. The credible person was credible, was able to get approval and able to sell. That's what I learned from my career.
Yeah, I think my experience, if any of you actually have a Medtech startup in the US, and they're interested in getting into China market. I think looking back, for the past 30 years, so I was with Boston Scientific, and I basically helped set up the shop from the very beginning. So back in the late 90s, last century. So, for example, for the stent, the only procedure for stent was roughly about 2,000 to 3,000 cases a year. Right now, I think for last year, probably over 700 So pretty much, I think reached the same number of U.S. the number of the cases performed. So I think the China market you cannot ignore the China because the potential is huge. The huge population, the patient populations, and I think if you like to really get a company into China, you need to really find a very good Chinese partner. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult. I think as Mark mentioned, you need to find some company which already have infrastructure back in China for sales channels and for the regulatory approval channels and so on and so forth. And in the meantime, and I think you also need to really, if you're really interested in getting into China market, and you need to find some sort of, I think, investments from VC funds with the China angles, the people who already have a tremendous experience and insight about China. I think that those VCs actually can help you to map out how you should go about into China. So, I think my suggestion is still, I think even with a huge tension between US and China, I still the China market is still huge, and I think eventually the patients are still the most important to benefit the advancement of the technologies.
I think both William and Mark talked about their experience, very good experience in China. They have kind of already late stage. So I have, for myself, I have worked with those investments and mostly in kind of early stage. What I feel like is for early stage startups, because we are talking about US companies here, so the first thing, you are early, so you really need to focus on to get those US funding first, or European funding. Is you get these angels, because I think there are lots of angel groups nationwide. So get involved with angel groups. So because for the Chinese investment, I think lots of investment is really they are focused on the late stage. Either they said it kind of early, but they still want to see what's the revenue. They want to see the revenue coming out very soon. For U.S. angel groups, some of those they are kind of focused on they want to get revenue soon, but some of those really they can have the patience to wait for a longer time. I think that would be good, and also at the same time looking for, once you have US angels or US early stage VCs involved, then you find other investors from other markets. That would be much better for your company. And I think it's not really, because the North American market and also European market, those markets are big too. You cannot say, okay, it's hard to find investment over here. I'm looking for Chinese money or Indian money or any money. But if you lose your North American market, so those investors from other countries, they will feel like, oh, okay, they will hesitate to do the investment. So that will put this startup at a very bad position. That's what I think.
No, that's good to know. And sort of just, I think in terms of sort of the general question is how, if you don't have any contacts in China or the particular country that you want to enter into in Asia, there are different sources that you can approach. And obviously these sources you have to be comfortable initially with. I mean, if you work with international accounting firm or whatever, they may be able to provide some names in China or whatever that they know that you can start your discussions with. Lawyers, I mean, law firms also are good contacted sources. If you know some investors like us here at the table and you trust us and we're not conflicted in any way, we can provide, some names that you can pursue. If you've worked with U.S. Medtech companies that have operations, but I got to be careful about that if it's competitive. But they may know people on the ground there, as well as some of the other folks that you might know from the universities that you've worked with. Maybe your technology came out of university, and one of the professors there knows somebody. Those are all kinds of resources that you can leverage. But obviously, you have to go and vet the parties yourself as you go down the path. Are there any questions from the audience? I have sort of a few final questions. Yes.
So I'm from Boston, and so we're awash in groups from China coming and recruiting teams to come to accelerators. And for a young first-time entrepreneur, that's a very attractive opportunity. But I'm not sure it turns out for those who are, for example, looking for a manufacturing partner or whatever. So what's your sense of those kind of groups? The accelerators?
Can you repeat the question before?
Yeah, so I guess the question is...
I tend to go with what my lawyer said.
Yeah, so the question is, there are a lot of folks coming from China to the U.S., in particular to the Boston area, because they have a lot of promising startups there. And there are companies that are affiliated or associated or work with accelerators, right?
They'll bring them to an accelerator in Shenzhen or someplace like that.
To try
promising, you'll find your manufacturing partner, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and so the idea is come to China.
We'll give you a shortcut.
Yeah, and they'll give you the resources there to be able to approach the China market or whatever, the global market, because they have the resources there through sort of accelerator services. What is your general thought about
There is a lot of people that this, but most of them sort of like A-frame type of advisors. So if the person talking to you is an advisors, right? The best thing is you get if they done something.
Oh, that's
just a track record. I think the best deal would be. I have 2 deals in Boston. Most of these guys running around in Boston know them. But if they are associated with for example, like couple pharma company who has an incubator in Boston, and if they want to bring it to China, then that might be the best one because they have all the infrastructure available in China. They can do R&D, they can get approval, they can sell it. Especially, they're able to. They even have buildings in Boston. The thing about that is the way how you negotiate when you give up your name, let them run it, or you would ask them to put some money in your company and then give them the China rights, right? That might be another way to do it. So it all depends on case by case your technology, how your situation. A lot of companies because the asset is on the shelf, they're wasted anyway, so they will just give up. Some of them are doing trials themselves, which they want to control of the data. So sometimes they don't want anybody mess up with data, so they don't want anyone else to be able to do it themselves. So the situation, but nowadays you can do simultaneous trials within US and China, so which would be good. Before it was separate track, so separate track, if their data is different from yours, maybe because of design, maybe because of a racial difference, and then if they screwed up, and then you will have a problem in the US to be able to invest and then China. So this is kind of risk, But again, for me, is track record is everything to look at if they've done it.
Yeah, in addition to Mark's opinion, I think in China there's a different kind of accelerators at different areas.
That's right.
At different areas, they have their own specialties. Like a Shenzhen area, they are more like electronic products, and like in some areas, it's orthopedic. And so it really depends on your product. Your product is, in a different area, you get the different strengths. if you have orthopedic products, you go to Shenzhen area, that's electronics. I think maybe that's a wrong decision.
But when you get there, everyone promises they can help you.
Yeah, so I think really you need to do some homework first, really.
Yeah.
Get your homework done, and you can do the web searching, or you have some people, Chinese, they are from China like us, kind of know, okay, overall, the big direction need to be right? And then, so for the more detail, you can get.
And and then you have to also consider, well, you're here, and you have to be there too. And so being further away, are you willing to go and spend most of your time there to help the company grow? And also, is the market China first? And that may be a consideration too.
Yeah, just one comment. Actually, I think a lot of organizations actually they are government
I
sponsored.
didn't want to say that, but that's what I'm referring
And
to.
so be careful, and basically I think you need a good lawyer, and make sure that you whatever you do is in compliance with your laws. So I think
I feel like
that's
U.S.
great.
startups have a difficult time identifying real investors,
Yeah.
and there are many,
Yeah.
but it's not often you see them as you do the ones from the government.
Yeah, but there's local offices, they have incentive for you to get you
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there.
yeah.
But once you get over there, it's on your own. So
Right.
that's something you have to do.
Bait and switch now. Well, thank you very much for attending our session. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to come and ask us, or get our cards and follow up at any time. So thank you.